Okay, so here we go. AnnArbor.com. So we've talked a little bit about the technical parts of writing in terms of, run-on sentences and comma splices and not dividing your verb, which I actually realized afterward it wasn't a really good example of that, so I apologize. It's more like she quickly ran as opposed to quickly she runs. So things like that. But anyway, okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about like what in the world am I going to write about? And the best way to do that is that if there's something like going on in the big world of food that you're really interested in, or that you hear about on NPR or New York Times or whatever, that's great. But you want to sort of bring it back to your own little local part of the corner of the earth. And the way that I had this explained to me when the editor at AnnArbor.com talked to me about this was like, okay, great. There's this whole thing about pesticide resistant plants happening, and people are talking about it, but why don't you talk to a farmer in your neighborhood who is experiencing it? That is fascinating. And then you can link, say, New York Times talks about resistant proof or pesticide resistant plants, like super plants, because of all these crazy, well, anyway, we're not going to go into that. But and then you say, well, yeah, look at this. New York Times talks about it, and it's happening in our own backyard. And then you interview the guy about the own backyard, and then you summarize by being like, so look, New York Times, you're all over this, and it's happening to us as well. So that's a really good way to sort of structure a piece, is by taking a global, issue that's happening, finding someone in your neck of the woods that's experiencing it, talking about the global issue, then talking about the local thing, and then tying it back into the global thing at the end. So you're sort of like feet on the ground, as they say, in whatever world that they say that. And literally, you can find topics on anything. I typed in tomatoes, and there was an NPR story about heritage breeds losing the flavor of tomatoes, and you could be like, they're right, tomatoes taste like crap unless you get them at the farmer's market, so and then there's this other website that she talked about, and then just to go back and reiterate once again the idea of the hook, the editor Jen sent this out, and it was talking about different ways to do the hook. I'm going to sort of read them out because I think they're pretty cool. Single item lead. This lead focuses on just one or two elements of a summary lead for a bigger punch. For instance, when the Philadelphia Phillies won the 2008 World Series, their first championship since 1980, a story posted online by the AP Press began with a single item lead. Quote, the Philadelphia Phillies are world champions again. As opposed to this typical summary lead, which Reuters used. The Philadelphia Phillies ended their long wait for a World Series title with a short burst of baseball last night as they clinched the crown by completing a rain-suspended 4-3 win over the Tampa Bay Rays. Blah, blah, blah. You are, asleep by midway through that sentence. As opposed to the first one where it's pachang! It hits you, which is really cool. Amazing fact lead. Open with an amazing fact that arouses readers' interest, such as Washington. 60% of Americans opposed the U.S. war in Iraq, the highest number since polling on the subject began with the commencement of the war in March 2003, according to poll results, blah, blah, blah. So that's another way. When you figure out, according to your writing prompts, some interesting tidbit, the National Renters Association use chicken bones, and they also give money to lobbyists. I mean, you can, there's so many things to talk about in the world of food that you can usually find something that's either controversial, that's going to make someone angry, or that's what in the world? And you can throw that in your first sentence and then draw people in. Storytelling lead. Using a narrative style. I don't really like that idea, so I'm going to skip that one. Okay, and then we're going to talk about SEO. So search engine optimization. I talked about this before with the linking. It's really important. I mean, this is all they talk about in the world of blogs. Not only is it important to link to items, but it's also important to bold. I'm not quite sure why, but it's important. So you want to bold the name of the people and the places. So if you're talking about the New York Times, you want to bold it and also highlight it and then link it. And if you have any questions on how to do that, totally, let us know. Also, in terms of what to link, I think this is a really good point, so I'm going to read it. Search terms. The words you highlight and use for links should be searchable terms. Think along the lines of search engine optimization when you're selecting words for your link, especially for internal links. That means within the story. Search engines like Google pay attention to this. For example, let's say you're writing a story about medical marijuana. City Council passed a new ordinance, blah, 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 blah. Bad. City Council passed a medical marijuana ordinance at this meeting Monday, following 3 months of public meetings and discussion about whether or not the new law was necessary. And in the bad instance, they highlighted to link months of public meetings. Well, no one's going to ever write into Google search months of public meetings, right? Like, that's never going to happen. So the better way to do it is to highlight medical marijuana ordinance, because tons of people probably are going to write into Google search medical marijuana ordinance. And because you've highlighted those 3 words as opposed to the months of public meetings, that's what's going to show up, and you're going to get credit for it in the search engine optimization, which is awesome. And then it has a little reminder from AnnArbor.com about quoting, which you guys know how to do this, but it's just, it's good to be reminded. We are technically, this is the cyber world, and people do still get in trouble for stealing other people's ideas. So we don't want to get in trouble for that, because that's a silly reason to end up in the newspaper. So, make sure to always, even if it's a farmer, and half the time they won't remember. I know I shouldn't say that out loud, but they don't, So you can really almost write anything you want, but you shouldn't do that. I should stop talking. But my point of my story is that you want to put in quotes, and at least give them, that that's where the idea came from. No one will really call you out if it's the incorrect wording, but if the idea comes from somebody else, you should really, especially if you're quoting from a newspaper or from another written piece that someone could look up, for heaven's sakes, please, make sure to link back to that. Okay, let's go back to our agenda and see how we're doing. Full screen. Okay, so I was just also going to go over the blogging feedback review sent out that Kara and Lindsay worked on. So just making sure when you're going through and figuring out what you're writing on and figuring out what you're going to say, who is your audience? Your audience is someone probably who's already into local food, that probably already goes to farmers markets. So you don't have to start from the beginning and be like, food is really important. You can kind of assume certain things from the audience that Real Time Farms is doing. Yeah. What do they care about? Well, they care about where the food comes from. Otherwise, they wouldn't be reading our blog. So, that you kind of want to have to keep that in mind, that these people are already, as they say in certain energy world, you've got an already always listening going on. What are your major points and how do you want to succinctly communicate them? Hopefully, the thinking of the structure earlier has sort of helped you think about that. Do you have a hook? We've talked about the hook a lot, so hopefully you'll have a better idea of good hooks to go and look at. The other thing is the photos are really important. Just as I said when we looked at that corn dog piece with the paragraph that was whoa, this is way too big. It was a really bad picture of a corn dog also. I mean, it wasn't a very appealing story just from looking at it for a split second for me to read. So, the pictures, and they need to be in focus, and, you want to make sure you have good angles and just all of that wonderful stuff. It adds to the fact that you're selling your piece to people who have other things going on. So you need to compete with, the telephone ringing and the dog barking and the children crying and whatever else is going on in everybody's life. And, everything you can do to make that better is a good thing. And then also, please attach your photographs as an external file rather than inserting them into the document, just because then it's a lot easier for our editor to do what she needs to do. And then going back to the beginning, before we all started doing this, just Lindsay's original tips of picking your story. And then also her really good point about discretion. This goes back a little bit to the whole problem of, that this is how much of you to put into this story. It's really important to make sure, and you guys have actually, a lot of your posts are totally great on this, so I just am sort of saying this just to talk, but some people may disagree with you, and maybe they're reading our blog because they hate local food and because they, don't care where their food comes from. So, it's a good idea to kind of keep your own opinion out of it, just because then, it's probably leave the facts to sort of speak for themselves, as they say. And then finally, you know, we just a little reminder. Lindsay does have to edit. This is her job. She edits everybody. She edits all of us. So, you know, if your title is changed, if some things are moved around, don't take it personally. This is not anything that's personal. It's just, it has to fit sort of the ethos of what we're going for. So that is it. How are we doing? Do we have any questions? Kara always teases me that I'm from the East Coast, but because I talk so quickly. Maybe I talked very quickly. Lindsay, should we unmute and we could sort of have a chat, or are we good? Or how do we feel?
Good. Yeah, they're good tips.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of info.
Awesome. All right. Cool. Well, obviously, if you guys ever have any questions, or if you want to talk about this some more, or concerns, or we want to be helpful. So please, let us be helpful.
For sure.
Cool. Yeah, the SEO is pretty amazing stuff. Yeah. And it's one of those things you don't think about until you're like, how does Google ranking work? And you're like, wow, it really just has to do with how many links you have and how many bold things you have. And then you think to yourself, like, wow, this is a pretty silly system, but it's the best system there is. So that's what they're going with. Yeah.
I missed the first part. Did you introduce at all the fact that you've written a book and that it's amazing?
I did not talk about the fact that I've written a book. No.
Yeah. Okay. Can I say that?
Sure.
She's written this book, and it's called "I Dreamt of Sausage," and it's about her sort of spiritual. It's about her spiritual mind, body, spirit journey through an illness, and it is totally worth reading. It was the best book I read last year, and so.
Thanks, Karen.
If you search "I Dreamt of Sausage," you should go and take a look at it.
What's it called?
It's called "I Dreamt of Sausage."
Okay.
I'll send an email.
Yeah, send it out.
Than's Kara.
So she's not going to toot her own horn, so I have to toot it.
Yeah.
I'll say it's on my website if you go to my website.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Oh, well. Well, cool. Well, happy Friday,
What's your
everyone.
website?
Sorry?
Corinna, did you hear that?
No, what was that?
Oh, what's your website? CorinnaBorden.com.
Oh, CorinnaBorden.com. Yeah, hold on. I'll write it to everybody.
And they can read all your stuff there.
They can. Everything. Well, it was really nice to meet everybody, and thank you so much for being part of what we're doing this summer. We are so blessed. It's really awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks again.
Cool.
Thank you, Corinna.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Happy Friday.
Talk to you soon. All right.
Bye. Bye.